Mom uses my locked private diary and only true safe space as her daily reading material. When I was a preteen, my mom gifted me a diary with a tiny lock and keys. I hid the keys, taped them in hidden places, and began using it almost immediately. I was a bookworm and loved reading and writing. I was also quite neglected as a child, so my diary was the only place I could express myself and feel heard. I'd read my last entries and that allowed me to reflect on my own thoughts and actions and learn from past situations. It was honestly really great for my mental health. For a time, my mood and mental health improved. Time passed. I couldn't tell you how long. Probably a few months. Shortly after I wrote an entry talking about my first wet dream, a few seconds of feet peeking out of bedsheets. Nothing truly NSFW. My mom got furious at me and confronted me, full on screaming. She sat me in the living room as she towered over me, screaming at my face, asking me if I thought this was normal. That I was having depraved thoughts no child my age should have, for a preteen. Really, it was actually perfectly normal. That I had promised no sex before marriage when I was 5 years old, and that this was clearly going against my word, that I was, etc. I tried to defend myself at first and protest, not understanding how she even knew about it. But she took out the unlocked diary as proof of my depravity, and my attempts at defending myself, it was just a dream, just fueled her anger more. I sat there, silently crying, answering quietly whatever she wanted me to say to whatever she asked because nothing else would stop her escalation of screaming. I felt betrayed. My locked diary was my only safe place in that home. I was careful with what I wrote in my diary after that incident and set her a few tests to check if I was still having my locked diary read without my knowledge or consent. I did this by writing about innocuous incidents in a way that cold sounded like it was more than it was, knowing it would prompt questions out of curiosity every time. It didn't take more than 2 days for the questions to come. Turns out, she'd hunt for my diary's keys and read it regularly. Needless to say, I stopped using my diary. My only breathing space had been turned against me. I significantly closed myself off from everyone. I felt if even my diary could betray me, then people even less. It was hard not writing. I no longer had an outlet for emotional or psychological relief, but I really couldn't trust anything anymore. After a week or two without any new entries, Mom asked why I had stopped using my diary. If I had dared, I'd have rolled my eyes and asked why do you think? But I knew better than to attract attention to myself and simply said I had lost interest in such a thing. Edit. Man, this community is amazing. The amount of support and encouragement is overwhelming and sweet. I really should mention that this was like 20 years ago for those who are concerned. I'm in a really good place now. I put more details in the comments, but I felt I should mention that it's old news here in the main post. My mum did something similar, so I started writing in code. I remember her face when I walked in, and she couldn't read it. Lol demands I decode it were met with absolute shit-eat grin and a no, nice. I considered it too, but my mom's control was absolute, and she'd have made me decide it for her anyway. It took me a long time for me to learn to say no. My brother and I did similar. We created an entire code and a mild version of our own language on top of that to write to each other and for our journals, which we also drilled and put master locks on. What do you mean by your own language? Like substituting word or like whole different language kinda deal? I'm 13 and I'm trying to learn cipher codes lol. My parents are amazing. I just watch a shit ton of Gravity Falls and thought ciphers were super interesting. Possibly relevant XKCD. As a mother that respects and respected my son's privacy growing up, this completely blows my mind. People who do this to their children and anyone else in their orbit are deranged. A friend told me how his mother would deliberately try to catch him masturbating as a teenager. Most normal people would avoid that situation like the plague. I've been thinking of doing a similar thing. Starting a zip file as a diary, encrypting it, and then writing in it in wingdings, a font pretty much undecipherable to those who don't know how. My mom did this to both of my older siblings with their diaries. She also would talk about the contents of those diaries to her friends during their visits, even in front of my siblings. I never kept one because I saw the effects of it. As a result, I still can't get myself to note down even important information because of the distrust of written evidence I got from my mom. Counseling is helping, but that distrust is real deep set. I don't really have a dairy, but for your mom to disrespect your privacy is her ultimate slap to the face, and she is obviously failing you as a parent. She has no right to be looking through your private stuff, especially without your consent. Just cut contacts with her for your sake. I hope and pray you're doing better. Thanks so much for your support. This was a long time ago. And you're right, she did fail as a parent for me. I see my sister more as my mom than my actual mom. It's kinda sad, but very true. If mom hadn't changed and grown tons since then, I definitely would be no contact today. After much self-growth, I'm in a good enough place now that I can recognize that I did in fact suffer neglect and abuse. I was resentful and angry for a long time, but I can recognize now that while my mom and dad were very far from the parents I would have liked to have, they came from even worse homes and gave me much better than what they had. They say it takes 3 generations to end the cycles of abuse. My parents started the healing by removing us from poverty and hunger and removing the worst of the abuse. Dad was made to sleep with the dogs outside in the years for being home late by 1 minute, made to sleep with a prostitute at age 12 so he could become a man, beaten for any reason, stuff like that. My parents may have been toxic, but they gave me the best they could give. I look back on their parenting as the uneducated and misguided attempts at being good parents. I'm still low contact because I'm still healing, but I'm in a better place now, and they too have grown so much since then. It's very encouraging for the future. Pregnant now. Can't wait to be the parent I always wanted to have for my child. I've been preparing my whole life for this. My child will have a home based on love and understanding. A place of peace and kindness, as we did in previous generations. Time to keep 2 diaries and start making up some seriously weird shit. Like you are planning to write Broadway plays, so have been sending money to a theatrical agent from your parents' account. They will lose their damn minds looking for the transactions. Write about kids who don't exist. Go into graphic detail about dissecting a frog or pig heart, etc. Make it not worth their while, or just plain boring stuff. Had tacos for lunch. Shrank my socks doing laundry, lol. Similar thing happened to me as a young teen. I destroyed it. I've moved out, and I'm a functioning adult, and I've tried writing in a diary since then, and I still just can't do it. Same. I wanted to have a pregnancy diary. After much effort, I managed to entries in 6 months. It's what made me realize how deeply this event traumatized me. I've always wanted to write a book. Same blockage. It feels like such a waste to have lost access to something that was so dear inside. I destroyed it. I feel this in my soul. I didn't realize how many people this happened to. I didn't tell anyone through the rest of my teenage years. And really still don't talk about it. I realized how much it affected me after I took a small journal to boot camp with me. I hardly wrote anything, and it sucks because I want to have those memories. What really makes me sad is that I destroyed the whole diary due to the one page that got me in trouble. I had so many other memories written in it, but I struggled to even look at it, let alone open it. She's gonna regret that when you turn 18 and cut her out of your life. What trash can of a parent reads a child's personal journal? And who holds someone accountable for a promise they made at age 5? Your mom sounds toxic. And to then ask you why you don't write in it anymore? Wow. Just wow. You should have kept writing. I'd have added stuff about how when she's old and weak you're gonna put her in the worst nursing home you can find and leave her to rot. See how she likes that entry. Small edit. So another poster mentioned that Ops mom has improved in recent years. That's good to see. I'm glad that at least some people can learn and improve. Once in my preteens my mom hacked my FB and looked through all my messages, didn't like what she saw, and basically ruined my life. A decade later, and after years of therapy, I started keeping a journal about things my therapist suggested and my overall thoughts. Mom found the diary and used it against me, trying to humiliate me yet again. Except this time I was an adult and I had control over my own life. It's been around 3 years since I've seen her. We barely speak, and she still asks why I don't miss her or the family. Get a fucking clue. Edit. Wording. Your mom made a copy of the key before she gave you the diary. There are a few things you could have done. First, you sit to write out detailed plans of how you intend to torture and murder your parents to convince them you're an absolute psycho. Another would be to keep 2 diaries, one full of bullshit for their eyes, the other the real one that you keep at school or a friend's house. Third, come up with a code or shorthand she can't understand. My mother did this to me. My daughter was given her first diary this year, and I let her know it was her space and I would not be touching it unless she gave me express permission. My mother found out and already harassed me about finding out what she is writing in it. She is 7. I repeat, 7 years old. I told my mom to shove it. My mom used to do this to me when I was younger. Up to when I was 14. I had been learning French at high school since year 7. So I just wrote in a different language that she didn't know. I remember once she sat me down in front of her and my dad and asked me to explain it. All I said I was practicing my French. Of course she didn't believe me, so I asked her what her problem was in French. She was lost for words and my dad was pissing himself laughing. He knows some French, but thankfully able to respect my privacy and boundaries. As I'm the youngest of 3, my mum is very observant of me and likes to watch my every move. She tried to dictate my life, but I shut that SHT down immediately. Folks, learn to write either in code or a completely different language. Mom gives me a diary for Christmas one year. Me, no idea what it even is. Mom explains the concept, including the idea that it's private. Me, zero interest and complete disbelief that it would in fact be private. Though I was really only worried about siblings. Mom, a couple of months later, why aren't you using that diary I gave you? Me, that's why. Bottom line, never write down anything you're not comfortable with someone else reading. That's a really fucked up thing to do to a child. Especially if it's systemic and unwarranted. I can relate to that situation. As my mother, Latino women think they own their kids, really thought she was entitled to all my private info. She wasn't really a bad mother. She was a product of her childhood and tried to do right by us. Just her concept of right was a little skewed, even at a young age, and with this type of upbringing which conditions us to accept it as normal. I knew this was fundamentally wrong. People need to be able to have safe spaces where we are not judged, condemned or even questioned. It's healthy. I have 2 tween kids, male, 12, and female, 13, and I would never invade their privacy like that unless absolutely necessary, like if I see signs of abuse, drug use, etc. And before even thinking that, I would have to reach out to them multiple times myself and through others. Then I might contemplate breaching their privacy. I lead my life based on the fact that we should never forget where we come from and never try to deny the bad things that happen to us, for the sum of our experiences makes us who we are. I analyze, synthesize, and try not to repeat the mistakes of those who came before me, or my own. My grandmother did something similar. And so I switched to writing about my family, and every time they angered me, I'd write my fantasies of retribution. The more I got yelled at about the entries in the diary, the more violent the entries got. And they eventually got the message when things got really graphic and stopped. I still keep a regular diary though, but it's not an obvious for obvious reasons. My mom did the same. I just moved in with my boyfriend at 24 with my own child, and the first thing I did was buy a journal, which prompted me to write for like 4 days straight and then cry for the next week over how much it actually messed me up not being able to journal. Knowing I can put my thoughts on paper and that my boyfriend for a second wouldn't even think about touching it was very overwhelming.